expeditions, multiplayer, and developer announcements. Those are the three main topics that we're going to be going over in this video. And also, before we go any further, I know we're showing SnowRunner gameplay in the background, and that's because I didn't want to make y'all watch the same Expeditions preview gameplay that y'all have seen in various other videos, both on my channel and channels of other YouTubers. So that's why we're having SnowRunner gameplay in this video, as opposed to the same Expeditions preview build gameplay that y'all have probably already seen. So without any more of my, rambling, let's go ahead and dive into the developer announcement that was recently posted, or at least recently posted as of the date of recording this video, which is January 12th, 2024. So let's go ahead and dive into the announcement. Now, this was posted by the community manager for Expeditions on the forums, and it starts by going through a few of the different reactions to the preview from various news outlets and this, that, and the other. But the primary part that I am interested in is where they specifically talk about multiplayer in Expeditions and answer some of the questions that they have been getting about it. Now, multiplayer in Expeditions has been a topic that a lot of people, I think, have been curious about. And of course, that's rightfully so, because this series has I don't know if I would call it a primary multiplayer history, but there's definitely a rich history in regards to people playing this game for the multiplayer component, or rather playing this series for the multiplayer component. So they said co-op mode will be released in Expeditions as a free update a few months after the release of the game, which has me concerned. Primarily because if we look at the update cycle for SnowRunner, we can see that when they've said a few months, that can mean give or take a massive variety of different amounts of time. A few months could be 2, a few months could be 5. And we honestly don't really have any way of knowing. So kind of until we hear more, we're kind of going into Expeditions with a little bit of an unknown as to when the game is going to actually have a multiplayer component. And after a lot of people have still been having issues with SnowRunner not functioning properly on Xbox and not being able to play with their friends for genuinely like a massive amount of time now, I honestly don't remember the actual amount of time off the top of my head. But I know it's a really, really long time. I mean, we're talking months on months on months. And to not be able to have a functional multiplayer component in SnowRunner on one of your primary platforms, that being Xbox, it's a little sketch when you announce that Expeditions is also not going to have its multiplayer component at launch and it's going to come a few months later. Now, to get back to the actual text of the developer announcement, they went on to say co-op is an important feature for both MudRunner veterans and newcomers. Interesting that they didn't mention SnowRunner in there at all. They just said MudRunner veterans and newcomers. That's why we want the multiplayer experience in Expeditions to feel as polished as possible, which means taking a few extra months. Like our previous MudRunner game, SnowRunner, we have some exciting post-launch updates planned for Expeditions, which we'll talk about soon. Thanks for your patience. Stay tuned for future updates, and thank you for being a part of the community. Signed, the Expeditions team. And after reading that, I have a lot of thoughts, and I have a lot of thoughts that I think will be important to share in various ways. Chief among them being the fact that I completely understand taking a little bit of extra time to make sure a feature is polished. However, coming off of the disaster, and yes, I am going to use the word disaster here because I feel like it genuinely applies, but coming off of the disaster of SnowRunner's multiplayer problems on Xbox, I don't know if it is a good or bad thing that they are delaying the release of multiplayer in Expeditions, because on one hand, I feel like you might think, oh, well, maybe this is a good thing because they're making sure that SnowRunner's multiplayer issues on Xbox in particular aren't going to happen. on Expeditions. However, I'm sure that there are going to be some other people that are going to see this and think, oh, well, that's just an unfinished game, so if it's not going to have the multiplayer at launch, why don't you just delay the whole game, or this, that, and the other? And I think that you're always going to have people that are going to honestly carry either of those views or carry some variation of one or the other, because it's honestly no secret that the Xbox community has been hit the hardest out of anybody in the SnowRunner player base when it comes to the past year of issues. And honestly, I'm going to stop saying past few months and I'm going to start saying past year, because honestly, Xbox players had been having issues already all the way through 2023, and their issues with the game just ended up getting worse and worse and worse. So I understand why they're mad. I understand why they don't want anything to do with future updates for this game. I understand why they abandoned the game, because it honestly wasn't giving them anything. Because if you invest a bunch of time into something, in this case a game, you want it to continue to reward your time, because, I mean, let's face it, time is something that we all kind of have to figure out how we're going to spend it. And there are so many different ways to spend your time these days, especially when it comes to video games, that if you choose to spend your time on, say, for example, SnowRunner, you don't want it to, in return, give you a bunch of non-functional areas of the game and not reward the time that you've spent on it. And I think that the Xbox community has been hit so incredibly hard by that. And I sympathize with that community greatly. And I understand that that may dissuade members of the Xbox community from jumping into Expeditions. And of course, let's not get too off topic here. I, for one, am still excited for Expeditions. However, I'm not necessarily placing my expectations for it on the same level that I would if this was a mainline release in the Runner series. This is a spin-off game. Expeditions is a spin-off game, and I feel like if you want to maintain a standard of expectations for it that are not going to leave you angry or upset, you're going to have to treat it as a spin-off. And that, of course, comes back to a lot of the comments that I see about Expeditions, where people have been saying, why was this not a DLC? Why? It almost seems like every time I post about Expeditions, or rather every time, honestly, any creator posts about Expeditions, their comments seem to get filled to a varying degree with people saying this should have been a DLC for SnowRunner. This has no business being a separate game. And having personally played it, or at least played a preview build of Expeditions, it's a lot more than you could bake into a SnowRunner DLC. A lot of people have been saying, oh, reskin, oh, just a different menu, or just different graphics, or just different textures. It does drive different. It does feel different. Interacting with the terrain does feel different. But honestly, these are all things that you would have to actually play the game to know and to feel. And in that regard, it's really hard to relay that information, because relaying that information requires that people be able to understand what they're seeing on a level past just seeing it. And I think that there's obviously going to be a disconnect there, right? I mean, I think if people see gameplay on a screen, regardless of whether or not they're feeling the interaction with that surface, they're going to see that gameplay and they're going to make various assumptions about what the game feels like to play. So say, for example, you had a game that looked like SnowRunner. Let's say that the physics were entirely different, but if it looked like SnowRunner, people would just look at it and assume that it played exactly like SnowRunner. And even if someone said, well, I know it looks similar to SnowRunner, but it actually plays a little bit differently, a lot of people would still reply with, well, no, I don't believe you. It looks like SnowRunner. It must play like SnowRunner. And I think that's a little bit of the disconnect that we're seeing with the reception, or at least the current reception of Expeditions at the present moment in time, because I think a lot of it is possibly coming from how many people are frustrated with SnowRunner, again, stemming from a lot of the Xbox issues, because I cannot understate how massive the Xbox community for this game is, and honestly was before the cascade of Xbox multiplayer issues and people on the Xbox platform started to leave the game. So either way, I definitely think that the series is in an interesting spot at the moment because they do have a strong core fan base. However, they also have a lot of unhappy players that have been kind of through the ringer with various platform-specific issues, and they're definitely going to need to rebuild some of that trust. So that is where I'm going to end this discussion, but if y'all have anything you would like to add to the conversation, let me know in those comments down below, and I will see y'all next time.